The Young and the Restless spoilers shock, Friday's full December 12th. The year in Genoa City seemed unusually charged as several storylines quietly converged, each carrying its own emotional weight yet somehow threading together in the backdrop of a town that thrived on unexpected reunions, shifting loyalties, and the fragile balance between ambition and vulnerability. Audra Charles, who had spent months projecting an image of unshakable confidence as she maneuvered through corporate battles and personal storms, found herself caught off guard by a moment she had never anticipated: the sudden reappearance of Noah Newman. His presence, familiar yet changed by time and distance, triggered a rush of emotions she had long kept barricaded. There was surprise, undeniably, but also a quiet joy that flickered beneath her polished exterior. Their relationship had been complicated, woven through mistakes, misunderstandings, and late-night confessions neither of them had fully processed before life pulled them in different directions. Yet seeing him again felt like opening a book she had once set aside, only to discover she still remembered every line. As fate would have it, Sienna Bacall, the enigmatic new figure connected to Noah's life, would soon encounter his familiar introduction that promised new ripples in the Newman waters, especially with Audra standing uncomfortably close to the emotional sparks she had tried to extinguish. Meanwhile, another corner of Genoa City buzzed with anticipation as Billy Abbott and Sally Spectra poured every ounce of creative energy into the launch of Abbott Communications, a project built on bold ideas, restless ambition, and the hope of rewriting their futures. The upcoming launch party symbolized the culmination of sleepless nights, relentless risk-taking, and the rare feeling that two people from very different worlds could shape something meaningful together. Sally, driven by equal parts artistry and a need to prove she belonged in any room she entered, meticulously polished every detail of the event, ensuring that it projected the exact mix of elegance and innovation that could reposition the Abbott brand. Billy, with his signature charm and impulsive spark, matched her pace, guided not only by experience but by the unpredictable instinct that had both destroyed and rebuilt him countless times. Into that creative whirlwind stepped Audra, composed and charismatic, offering genuine well wishes for their success. Her presence was unexpected but not unwelcome. She carried herself with a rare calm that suggested she was choosing diplomacy over competition, an approach that both surprised and intrigued those who had known her capacity for sharp edges. When Billy momentarily excused himself to take a phone call, Audra seized the opportunity to present him with a gift she had chosen deliberately: a travel book about Lemnos, the ancient Greek island once governed entirely by women, celebrated for its mythic history and quiet resilience. The symbolism was impossible to ignore, though Audra offered no explanation for the choice, leaving others to interpret it on their own. Sally, observing the exchange with an air of ironic amusement, remarked inwardly that she wished Audra would show her that same brand of generosity. There was no malice in the thought, just an acknowledgement of how complicated their dynamic had become as two ambitious women navigating overlapping professional and personal terrains. Even without direct confrontation, the tension between them hovered just beneath the surface, fueled by admiration, rivalry, and the silent awareness that either one of them could reshape the future of Abbott Communications if the opportunity rose. As the hum of preparations continued, the sound of footsteps on the staircase announced the arrival of Jack and Carl Abbott, both descending like men already burdened by the weight of decisions, secrets, and the ongoing war with Victor Newman. Their presence subtly shifted the energy in the room, prompting Audra to consider leaving before the familiar friction reignited. She made a polite gesture of departure, but Sally, sensing the underlying current, questioned whether Audra truly intended to miss Billy's big night. Audra, with a hint of resignation, responded that her attendance might not be the wisest choice. That single hesitation opened the door for Carl, who could never resist inserting himself into Audra's emotional dilemmas to challenge her reasoning. His question cut to the truth. Why wouldn't she stand by the one person in this complicated town she still considered a genuine friend? The tension between them, sharpened by past entanglements and unresolved feelings, crackled through the room. Audra, unwilling to let Carl see how deeply his words struck her, brushed off the provocation and ascended the stairs with a composed exit that hid the turmoil she carried. In the silence she left behind, Billy returned, immediately catching the shift in atmosphere and asking what he had missed. Kyle and Jack exchanged a glance heavy with subtext before Billy pressed further, wanting clarity on what had been unfolding within Jabbit while he focused on the communications launch. Jack, always the reluctant bearer of grim realities, finally revealed the mounting crisis. Diane was coordinating a major counterstrike against Victor's latest offensive. Victor Newman had launched an aggressive technological incursion aimed at undermining Jabbit at its foundation, and the threat was not just strategic, it was existential. Diane, despite her polarizing reputation and the skepticism she still faced from parts of the Abbott family, had taken charge of orchestrating the defense. She had assembled the IT department to track, isolate, and neutralize the AI-driven program Victor had weaponized against them. Every move was calculated to not only expose the infiltration but to trace its origin back to the source, thereby turning Victor's attack into an opportunity to expose his methods publicly. Jack's explanation exposed the growing complexity of the conflict. Victor's actions were not simply aggressive corporate tactics, they were a declaration of dominance, a challenge designed to push Jabbit into submission or chaos. Kyle, caught between loyalty to his family, resentment over internal disputes, and his own ambitions, wrestled with the implications. The entire situation demanded absolute unity, yet unity was the one thing the Abbotts rarely maintained for long. As Billy listened, he felt the familiar pull of family legacy tugging at him, reminding him that no matter how far he strayed into new ventures, the Abbott name and its perpetual battles would always circle back to claim his attention. The launch party for Abbott Communications suddenly felt heavier, shadowed by the realization that success in one arena might do little to shield them from collapse in another. While all this unfolded, Sienna Bacall's upcoming meeting with Noah Newman's family lingered on the horizon as a separate but equally destabilizing thread. For Noah, the introduction was more than a formality, it was an emotional reckoning. His parents, grandparents, and extended family were masters at dissecting motives, histories, and vulnerabilities, and Sienna, mysterious and emotionally guarded, would be stepping into a world where nothing remained unexamined for long. Audra, still reeling from Noah's return, could not avoid the tight knot forming in her chest at the thought of watching him walk forward with someone new. She had promised herself she wouldn't interfere, but the heart rarely obeyed strategies crafted by the mind. The collision of past and present love, business conflicts, family intrigue, and unspoken emotional currents created a setting rife with potential upheaval. Yet beneath every interaction, every silent look, every unfinished conversation, lay the unmistakable truth that Genoa City thrived on transitions like these. The arrival of Sienna signaled a shift in Noah's journey. The launch of Abbott Communications marked a new era for Billy and Sally. The gift Audra gave hinted at histories she had not yet confronted. Diane's technological counterstrike threatened to expose Victor's overreach. And through it all, Audra's unexpected joy at seeing Noah again simmered beneath layers of composure, reminding her that feelings denied do not disappear, they only wait for the right moment to demand acknowledgement. In the coming days, alliances would shift, old wounds would reopen, and the delicate structure of trust within and between families would be tested. But for now, each character moved quietly within their own orbit, unaware of how dramatically their paths were about to intersect, how one launch party, one investigation, one reunion, and one act of sabotage would converge into a storm capable of reshaping the destinies of the Abbotts, the Newmans, and every heart caught between them. The moment Kyle voiced the possibility that they might finally expose Victor's illegal activities, a spark ignited inside the Abbott war room. A spark fueled not only by ambition but by the accumulated weight of years spent navigating Victor Newman's relentless machinations. Billy, already restless with anticipation over the counterstrike Diane had orchestrated, felt adrenaline pulse through him at the idea of finally seeing justice catch up with the men who had evaded consequences far too long. For Billy, the notion of Victor paying for his crimes was more than corporate warfare, it was vindication. A release from a lifetime of interference and manipulation from Genoa City's most intimidating patriarch. Jack, grounded as always in realism yet unable to resist the flicker of hope that victory was possible, acknowledged that if everything went according to plan and Victor's AI infiltration was traced back to him, they might never have to face him as an adversary again. It was a rare and alluring vision, a future where Jabbit no longer braced daily for an attack from the Newman fortress. A future where the Abbott family could focus on healing old wounds instead of defending against new ones. But like all visions in Genoa City, it was fragile, and its fragility would soon be tested by a revelation no one saw coming. Across town, the atmosphere could not have been more different as Nikki and Claire Newman greeted Victor with warmth and relief upon his return from Los Angeles. Nikki, who had spent her life balancing devotion, loyalty, and the painful awareness of the man Victor could become, clung to the comfort of seeing him safe and home again. Claire, eager to solidify her belonging within the Newman family, radiated a tentative joy that softened the hard edges of their recent challenges. The reunion carried a serenity that rarely lasted in this family, and its delicate peace was disrupted almost immediately by the arrival of Noah, Sharon, and Nick, their entrance adding momentum and familiar tension to the room. Moments later, Sienna stepped into the foyer, her presence subtle yet charged, the soft uncertainty in her posture betraying the storm she carried within. As Noah exchanged greetings with his family, Sienna hovered slightly behind him, visibly uncomfortable, as though the walls of the Newman home held memories she had never been meant to encounter. Victor approached her with a measured calm, and she thanked him for bringing her to Genoa City, her tone polite but threaded with unease. Victor's brief admonition to be careful, a phrase so simple yet strangely foreboding, hung in there like a quiet warning the others had not yet learned to interpret. The introductions continued as Noah met Claire, who wore an outfit resembling the character Waldo, an unexpected visual that created an odd mix of humor and surreal tension. Noah, ever gracious, then introduced Sienna, hoping to bridge the widening gap between her past and the family she would inevitably become entangled with. Before either could settle into the rhythm of conversation, Adam Newman and Chelsea Lawson arrived, their expressions alert, as though they sensed the next blow was already on its way. Victor did not wait for calm or context. Instead, he delivered the truth with the blunt force of a man who understood the cost of hesitation. Someone was stalking the Newman family, he announced, and the threat was far closer than anyone imagined. Matt Clark was still alive. The shock rippled instantly. Nikki gasped, haunted by memories of past confrontations and the trail of damage Matt had once left in his wake. Chelsea, who had been trying to rebuild her life with fragile steadiness, demanded to know who he was and why his presence mattered now. The answer did not come from Victor but from the woman who had been quietly unraveling ever since stepping into the mansion, Sienna. In a small, strained voice edged with dread, Sienna admitted that Matt Clark was her husband, though she had known him under the name Mitch. The revelation dropped like a stone into the middle of the room, sending shockwaves through every Newman in its radius. Sienna, who had so carefully shielded her past, suddenly stood exposed under the weight of her connection to a man capable of destroying their entire family. Sharon, whose past was deeply scarred by the violence Matt had inflicted on her, felt old trauma rising as she announced that he had once attacked her. The memory was no longer just hers, it became a piece of evidence, a warning that the danger Matt posed was not hypothetical but violently real. Nikki added gravely that they had all believed Matt was dead, a belief that had shaped years of recovery and legal battles, including the moment when Nick had been wrongfully arrested for Matt's presumed murder. The mention of that ordeal tightened the atmosphere further, reminding everyone just how deeply Matt's existence or supposed lack of it had once torn through their lives. Nick's jaw tightened as the truth settled in. A man he had once been accused of killing had never died at all. The injustice of it seared him anew, not just because of what he had endured, but because the revelation meant that Matt had been out there, alive, watching or waiting, carrying grudges no one had known to fear. Sharon's voice, steady but laden with urgency, cut through the unfolding chaos as she insisted that Matt was a threat they all needed to take seriously. Her words rang with the authority of someone who had lived through his violence and understood the mindset of a man who thrived on control, secrecy, and psychological power. The room seemed to constrict around the revelation, trapping each family member in their own web of memories, fears, and questions about what Matt wanted now, why he had resurfaced, and how deeply he might already be embedded in the shadows of their lives. Sienna's confession became the pivot point on which the entire room shifted. Her marriage to Matt Clark, an inadvertent tie to a predator, con artist, and manipulator, cast her in a new and settling light. She had not known who he truly was, yet her ignorance did not make the danger any less immediate. For Noah, the revelation was a blow that threatened to dismantle the tentative rebuilding of trust that had grown between them. He looked at Sienna with a mixture of disbelief and protectiveness. torn between wanting to shield her from the consequences of a past she had not chosen and needing to distance himself from the storm she had inadvertently carried into his family. Adam's concern sharpened into alertness, connecting invisible threads between this threat and the old traumas that still haunted Chelsea and Connor. Nikki felt the resurgence of a fear she had buried long ago, aware that Matt's return, and like Victor's battles, was not something she could counter with strategy or influence. Sharon felt the old scars reopening, the memory of Matt's hands, his threats, the coldness of his cruelty returning with vivid clarity. Victor studied the room, absorbing every reaction, every tremor of fear, every shift in posture. His announcement had not only exposed a threat but tested their unity. For all his flaws, Victor had always understood that the greatest danger to the Newman family was not external attack but internal fragmentation. They would have to face Matt Clark as one. The irony was not lost on him, while the Abbotts plotted to bring him down through technological exposure and legal traps. A ghost from the Newman past had emerged to challenge their family's stability from within. If Victor sensed the approaching storm surrounding the Abbotts' investigation, he did not show it. His focus was on the predator resurrected from the ashes of presumed death, the man with motives unknown, a man possibly seeking revenge, leverage, or chaos. Victor's warning to see an earlier "careful where you step" echoed with chilling accuracy, as if he had sensed the eruption before anyone else recognized the tremor beneath their feet. As each Newman processed the revelation, the room grew heavier with the awareness that Matt's return would not be a simple confrontation. His survival alone meant he had been moving in secrecy, choosing the moment to strike, and hiding behind layers of deception deep enough to fool law enforcement, family members, and even a wife who had never known his true name. He had infiltrated Sienna's life under false pretenses, and now, through her, he had infiltrated theirs. The family's response would need to be swift, strategic, and merciless, for Matt Clark was not merely a criminal, was a chameleon, a man capable of shedding identities, manipulating emotions, and inflicting psychological damage long before physical harm ever occurred. In that moment, the Newman household felt the shift of an old threat returning to reclaim its place in their narrative. The Abbotts believed they were closing in on exposing Victor, unaware that the Newman family was simultaneously being pulled into a darkness only they could confront. The two storylines, separate yet destined to collide, now moved toward a volatile intersection where the truth, once uncovered, would set off consequences neither family could fully predict. The storm was coming quietly, deliberately, and with the face of a man everyone thought was dead. The chaos unleashed by Victor's revelation spread through the Newman family like wildfire, leaving each member scrambling to reclaim a sense of stability even as old fears and unresolved wounds resurfaced. Claire, who had only recently found her footing within the Newmans, processed the revelation with a forced composure, reminding herself that she still had responsibilities that could not be abandoned, even in the face of danger. She insisted she needed to prepare for the product launch party, clinging to the structure of routine as a way to shield herself from spiraling into panic. Nick, ever the protector, shifted instantly into action, informing Sharon that she would take Noah and Sienna to the lake house for the night, a temporary refuge that doubled as a controlled environment where they could regroup without drawing attention. Sharon complied without hesitation, accustomed to stepping into the caretaker role whenever the family was threatened, and once they arrived, she moved through the familiar kitchen with the instinctive ease of a woman who had weathered far worse storms. She offered to prepare food for Noah and Sienna, keeping her tone composed even though her thoughts churned beneath the surface. But when she returned from the kitchen carrying a tray of sandwiches, she nearly rolled her eyes into the ceiling at the sight of them entangled on the living room couch, kissing with the kind of intensity that made her wonder whether impending danger only hid in their need for connection. She placed the tray down with exaggerated restraint, suppressing the urge to remind them that the world was not exactly stable at the moment, and she stepped back before her expression betrayed the mix of amusement, disapproval, and protective concern swirling within her. The temporary calm in the lake house shattered again when Nick arrived, reminding Noah that hiding was never enough when dealing with someone as unpredictable and vengeful as Matt Clark. Noah followed his father out, both of them stepping back into the polished interior of the GCEC, where the controlled elegance of the environment contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing beneath the surface of their lives. Nick calmly told his son that he would book a room for him and Sienna, not for comfort but as a strategic decoy setup meant to lure Matt if he was monitoring their movements. It was a chilling reminder that while the family sought to protect themselves, they also needed to expose their enemy, and sometimes bait was the only way to draw a predator into the open. Noah absorbed this strategy with a heavy heart, torn between fear, loyalty, and the growing anxiety over Sienna's connection to Matt. Just as the weight of the situation threatened to pull him inward, Audra descended the staircase, her dress catching the soft lobby lighting as though she were stepping into a scene she was never meant to miss. Her eyes met Noah's, and there was a flicker of recognition, a brief smile that held layers nostalgia, and resolved affection, and perhaps a hint of longing she could no longer disguise. Noah returned the smile, subdued but genuine, a moment of warmth that collided clumsily with the complexity of the life he was living now. The sight of Audra stirred something unspoken between them, something neither of them dared to voice while Sienna lingered just steps away in emotional confusion of her own. Back at the ranch, tension wound itself into every corner of the Newman estate as Nikki confronted Victor about the product launch. Her voice carried the familiar mixture of frustration and wounded disappointment as she pointed out that he clearly had no intention of attending the event, one that was important to the family and symbolic for Claire. Victor, distracted and distant, dismissed her by stating he had more important matters to handle, a statement that pierced Nikki's patience like a needle. She demanded to know what could possibly take precedence over supporting their family in a moment of celebration, but Victor remained impenetrable, offering no explanation. His silence was a wall she could neither scale nor move, and Nikki, simmering with anger and hurt, turned away and left the room, leaving Victor in an atmosphere thick with resentment. Adam and Chelsea, sensing the escalating conflict and aware that Victor was spiraling into one of his dangerous cycles of revenge, quietly excused themselves. Adam placed a steadying hand on Chelsea's arm as she prepared to leave and get herself ready for the event, her nerves frayed by the revelation about Matt, her heart aching for her son, and her mind spinning with the fear that history might repeat itself in a way she could no longer control. When the room finally emptied, leaving only Victor and Adam, the dynamic between them shifted into the uneasy tension that had defined their relationship for decades. Victor's expression hardened, a dangerous gleam forming in his eyes as he told his son that he was ready to act, ready to strike before his enemies could strike him first. He declared with unwavering certainty that Jack Abbott would pay the price tonight, as if the mere pronouncement made it inevitable. Adam stiffened at the declaration, struggling to mask his discomfort. He had his own complicated history with Jack: rivalry, betrayal, unexpected moments of grace, but he bore Jack no ill will in the present. Their feud had cooled into mutual wariness rather than hatred. Adam confessed openly that he had no issue with Jack and saw no reason to target him. The fact that Victor dismissed Adam's concerns with the cold efficiency of a man who believed emotion only clouded judgment reaffirmed something Adam had always known. Victor fought battles not because they were necessary but because he believed control was his inheritance, his duty, his identity. Before Adam could press further, Victor's phone rang, slicing through the tension with a sharp, urgent tone. He glanced at the screen, his brows lifting slightly in recognition, before he answered and announced to Adam that the caller was Michael Baldwin. The significance of that name hung in there like a spark poised to ignite, because if Michael was calling, whether as ally, informant, or bearer of a warning, then the night ahead was destined to become far more volatile than anyone anticipated. The convergence of these threats, the Abbott counterstrike, the Newman family fracture, the resurfacing of Matt Clark, and Victor's escalating desire for retribution hinted at a looming collision that would reshape alliances, expose buried truths, and test the limits of loyalty across both families. Each character moved through the evening carrying secrets, fears, and shifting loyalties, unaware that they were all stepping toward the same storm, a storm fueled by revenge, identity, old wounds, and consequences that could no longer be outrun.